everybody. Welcome to this evening's program, Home Freezing Basics, Safe and Smart Ways to Preserve Everyday Foods. Uh, Tonight, I'm going to be your MC. My name is Elena. Our Q&A moderator this evening is going to be Marina. Our panelists tonight will be Maria, Mary, Robin, and myself, Elena. As a heads up, this program is being recorded and it will be posted on our website. A link to a class handout with recipes for this class will be provided when you submit the post-class survey that pops up when you leave the Zoom room at the end of the program or before. Uh, just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted if you're not speaking. During live questions, you're welcome to unmute and speak or raise your Zoom hand if you prefer. That can be done in the React button on the tab at the bottom of your screen. Next, please. If you have questions at any time, you are welcome to type them into Zoom's Q&A feature. So you're going to look for the little speech bubble icon with a question mark in it. You just click on that. It should be on the bottom of your bar at the Zoom screen. Can you advance, please? If it's not, go ahead and click on the three dots for more, and it should be popping up in that list. Yeah, perfect. Next, please. Again, during open discussion, just speak up or raise your Zoom hand. That is, of course, the most direct way to ask your question. Next, please. So who are we? UC MFP Online Delivery Program is a community outreach online-based grant-funded volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. We provide up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. Next, please. A quick disclaimer, we are volunteers who cannot speak for the University of California. We also do not endorse or oppose any specific organization, product, or service on behalf of UC. Any equipment or product that we show, use, or mention is only illustrative and, again, not an endorsement. Next, please. So, what is our mission? Our mission is to keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate, research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. Next, please. So for today's program, we're going to go through a few different things. Maria will discuss the science of freezing and a little bit behind what we're going to see there is a lot of the more technical aspects of it, like freezer burn and what to do if the power goes out. Then Mary will discuss pantry to freezer. That will be focusing on fun breakfasts that you can make in the freezer and store for a later date. Robin will then talk about grocery to freezer. She has all kinds of fun stuff planned, including chicken and some cookies. And then I will be talking about some garden to freezer, where I'll discuss what do you do when you get the inevitable huge amount of zucchini that I'm sure we all receive once a year. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Maria to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Elena. And I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of freezing. And it's because the water in food is really a unique molecule. And so I found the picture there that shows how ice forms, and as you probably have seen. So why do we freeze? Well, it's the most common method of food preservation because it's easy, convenient. We all have freezers, probably, and as part of our refrigerator, if not a separate deep freeze, save money, reduce food waste, and we can adapt to things for dietary preferences or restrictions. So, actually, one of the tips that Marina gave us that I hadn't thought of was freezing grains, and I really I like oatmeal. I have been trying to use oatmeal that you have to cook so I don't get all the sugar. And so I tried it. I made a bowl of oatmeal when you cook it the slow way. It takes time, which I'm usually too lazy in the morning. So I froze it in some ice cube trays. put them into a bag that where I could squeeze out the air. And then this morning I popped out a couple of the cubes and voila, I had my breakfast all ready to go. So what is freezing? Well, we all know it's going from water to ice, which is a solid. And the thing that happens with ice is that there's no free water available. If there's any physical chemists on the call, I apologize. But basically, for food safety reasons, there's no water that microorganisms can use to grow and multiply. But really important to be aware is that freezing does not kill microorganisms. Robin will talk a little bit about it. It does help with some other types of spoilage, but it's very important then to thaw food with one of three safe methods: the refrigerator, cold water, and in the microwave. And again, Robin's going to go into detail on these. I just have another example too. I really like blueberries. I like to eat them frozen. And so I take them, wash them, and just put them on a tray to freeze. And this way I can just grab a handful. So this freezes them individually. So what is freezing? How does it preserve food? Water, interestingly, water is the only molecule that expands when it's frozen. And what happens in plants is that as it expands, and I just have a little diagram there, but it breaks the cell walls in the plant tissue, causes the food to become mushy when it's thawed. But we can help by adding sugar or starch if you're using, let's say, a puree, like a spinach puree, to firm the texture. So here I have three pictures of strawberries. Here you can see a little bit of sugar that I've added to this bowl, and you don't need to add a lot. I usually do a tablespoon per quart. And then I put them, in this case, I did not individually quick freeze them. I poured them all into a bag. And then when they thawed, you can see here's the fluid that's come out of the strawberries. And because they had sugar, still have some texture to them. So, what are some tips on freezing? Because it does change the quality of the food. So, the freezer should be at or below 0 degrees. And you can see I just popped this into my freezer. But one of the things, make a note to go check the temperature of your freezer when we're done with the call. If you don't have a thermometer, you can buy them pretty inexpensively. It's very important to use proper storage containers that keep air out of food or away from food as much as possible because that does affect the quality. The other thing is that really helps is to store the food that is the most fragile or delicate away from the door of the freezer or the lid of the freezer if you're using like a chest freezer. And that's because those areas, as the freezer gets opened, it warms up slightly. So this is a picture of my freezer and my granddaughter's artwork. And so here's my freezer. So what happens is again, almost all the freezers in the United States, at least, have self-defrost functions. And that happens by heating up the outside of the freezer just slightly and causing the ice to melt, and then there's a drain. So I put ice cream, strawberries, anything that's more fragile into the center of the freezer. And same thing if you have a deep freeze. So be aware of that. So why does quality change? Well, oxygen is really one of the main reasons, as the main culprit. So in the future presentations, the others will give you all kinds of ideas to help remove the oxygen. The other thing is that when water expands, as I mentioned, water expands when it's frozen. So I don't know about you, but I know with the hot California days, I like to put a can of something, something like this in the freezer to cool it down quickly. But if you forget it, you may have had this happen where then the can explodes, and that's because the water's frozen and it expands. So had a little bit of a mess to clean up. The other thing that happens because of oxygen exposure and also the interacts with the water transitioning between solid to vapor is called freezer burning. You probably have heard of it. And so here's a couple pictures You can see it, they look kind of dried out. The ice crystals are formed. This is chicken. Again, you see the dried out appearance. The food is safe to eat, but the texture is usually really chewy and the flavor just isn't there. Sometimes it's almost more cardboard-like. And one of the things I noted in this picture is that this package, excuse me, is not one that you can remove the oxygen. So for best quality, again, really important to have good containers that are airtight and air and watertight. If you have a partially filled container like this one where I have some white sauce I wanted to freeze, I put plastic wrap over the top and then put the lid on top of the container and froze it that way. Um, Another um, another chemical are enzymes that can continue to ripen food. And so I wanted to mention this because freezing does slow enzymes, but it doesn't stop or destroy them. And so in order to control enzymes, we use blanching. And so I'll show you the process here in a minute. I put this slide in just to show you how you can easily go from your fresh product. I know we're not harvesting green beans yet, but pretty soon some of us may have them, to the freezer. And again, these are individually quick frozen, so I can pull out what I want to your final dish. So in order to blanch green beans, and I have this video here that I'll start. You want to make sure that you have everything assembled. So blanching is basically a process of using boiling water or steam to denature the enzymes. And because enzymes aren't microorganisms, so the proper term is to denature, and some ice and ice bath. So I've washed my green beans, trimmed them, cut them, and put them into the boiling water. Green beans should blanch for 3 minutes, and that information is available in the handout. The National Center for Home Food Preservation has that. So you'll receive that link and tell you how long to blanch your vegetables. So you bring it back as quickly as possible up to boiling. I put a lid on it so that it would get back up to boiling. And so I boiled them for 3 minutes. We're not going to sit here for 3 minutes. And so here they are. I'm at the end of my 3 minutes, and I have a strainer. You can also get special things to help with blanching, a blanching basket, but I don't have that. So I just have a strainer, and I pulled my green beans off of the heat and then strained them. You can do this over the sink, of course. I wanted to keep it in the video, but also it helps save water if you are interested in that. And the texture stays pretty firm after only 3 minutes. And you can see the color is a bright green. So once you've drained it, then we put it into your ice bath. And there it is, my ice bath. Mainly ice, but enough water so the ice floats a little bit. And then you want to cool it down until it's about 70 degrees. So usually 3, 4 minutes, depending on how dense your food is and how much food you have. And so you want to stir it so it cools down as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it keeps cooking. Okay, so there it is. And then again, put it in the strainer through a strainer and pick out the ice cubes. Here's my sheet pan, my baking pan that I'm going to use to put the green beans on. And so I pulled the green beans out and spread them out on the pan and put them into the freezer. This way, I usually let them freeze overnight, but green beans don't take very long. And so here they are in the tray, and then you can see I have my bag ready to go. So what about when the power goes out? Which whether you're planning on it with a power safety plan shut off, or if it's a surprise, it's always good to keep your freezer at least 2/3 full. And most of us at home probably don't have too much trouble in our combined refrigerator freezer unit. But a deep freeze, you may need to add containers that have water. So if your freezer is getting less than two-thirds full, get a milk jug or something else and fill it with water, then freeze it. The food will stay frozen for at least 48 hours if the freezer is not open. And a deep freeze will keep it colder. So if you have a lot of food to freeze, you'll want to use a deep freeze because of the defrost, even if the power's out and the way the freezer is insulated, the freezer unit of your refrigerator will thaw faster. So now one thing that's really important also is if the food is thawed, you need to throw it away because you don't know how warm it's got in your freezer. And there's one way to test for that. Excuse me, that's using the coin in the bottle. So in this picture here, I have a bottle of water that I've filled, not quite, again, about two, three quarters maybe full. I put it in the freezer and frozen, and then I stuck a nickel in the bottle. Now, and then I put the bottle back in my freezer. So in this case, then the freezer had thawed, and you can see the coin is down here at the bottom. So what happens when your electricity goes out is the food can thaw, the coin will fall down through the water as the water thaws, and then it will freeze again when the power comes back on. Now, if I didn't have this in here, I wouldn't know if the freezer had if the food had thawed or not. So this is good to keep one of these in there if you have power outages. All right, Mary's going to go ahead and we'll be taking questions after Mary's presentation.
Thank you, Maria. Next slide. So it's important before we begin any kind of food preservation or cooking that we clean. Microorganisms are all around us in our environment and on our food, and they can cause accelerated food spoilage and illness like salmonella and listeria. Next. So it's important to clean your work area. Any surfaces you may touch, your cell phone, timers. I like to also wipe down my refrigerator handles. Tie back your hair and wear an apron. Your apron doesn't just
So they can just call you anytime, maybe.
Thank you. Your apron doesn't just protect your clothing from your food, it also protects your food from whatever you have on your clothing, dog hair, anything like that. You also want to wash your hands, gather your utensils, recipes, and ingredients, and make sure to wash your produce before you begin. Next. So why freeze breakfast? It saves time on busy mornings. Breakfast is all ready to go. Just heat it and eat. Save money. So I'm not tempted to go get convenience food or takeout if I know that breakfast is ready to go. It also helps reduce food waste by using up what you have. And it helps with dietary restrictions. So in my family, I'm primarily on a plant-based diet, and my family is not. So it's helpful if I have breakfast or any kind of meals put in the freezer for either them or myself. Next. So I gave myself a challenge. I wanted to create simple freezer-friendly meals using only what was in my pantry, refrigerator, and freezer. I wanted to make as few trips to the grocery store as possible. So I checked my pantry, fridge, and freezer, and I was really surprised by how much I had in there. Next. So the first recipe I did was vegan breakfast burritos for myself. I did loosely base this on a recipe. I made some substitutions. So I took this challenge pretty seriously. When I went to make the burritos, I realized all of my tortillas were gone. So I learned how to make tortillas. I'm not saying you have to do that. It was just a fun challenge for me. So you want to start by gathering your ingredients, washing your vegetables, and you're going to cook according to the recipe or your preference. So throughout my slides, you'll see I have some tips on each slide. And the tip for this slide is freezing preserves quality, but it doesn't improve it. So when you put something in the freezer, it's not going to get better. All right, filling and freezing. So before you fill your burritos, you want to allow the filling to cool completely. Adding hot food to the freezer is going to raise the temperature, and then the quality of your food is going to go down. So once the filling's cooled, you're going to add it to your tortilla, roll it up tight, and I like to place the burritos on a parchment lined tray and freeze them like this first. It helps them to freeze quicker. And when I go to load them into my freezer bag or container, the burritos aren't going to come undone and they're not going to stick together. So another tip is when you're freezing, spread your containers out in the freezer to allow air to circulate. Next. All right, so Maria talked a little bit about removing air from your packages. So there's three ways to do that. You can use a straw to remove air. You do that by inserting a straw into a freezer bag, zipping it up all the way to the straw, and then you just suck the air out, remove the straw, and seal your bag. And then you could just pop it in the freezer. Another way is to use water displacement to push the air out. So you're going to seal your bag almost all the way closed and then carefully lower it into your water, and the water is going to push the air out. Once the air is out, you seal your bag, wipe off your bag with wipe your bag off, and then you can freeze it. Another way is using a vacuum sealer. So vacuum sealing is really good at removing the oxygen from the bag, which can create conditions for Clostridium botulinum to grow. I know we're not talking about canning, but this is a possibility. So if the conditions are right, which they are in a vacuum sealed bag, low oxygen, moist food, low acid food, and the temperature between 40 to 140 degrees. So what happens is you vacuum seal your bag, you suck all the air out, and then you go to thaw it in your refrigerator, and the moist environment can allow the bacteria to grow. So there's a pretty easy way to avoid this. What you can do is, what I do is I cut open the bag and I dump the contents into a Tupperware container, and then I thaw it that way. Thawed in the refrigerator in the container. Next slide. Okay, so once we have our burritos in our bag, you're going to label with the content of the bag, what's in there, and the date you froze it, and then you freeze. You can enjoy these burritos within 2 to 3 months for best quality. You can enjoy after that, but the quality will start to go down. So a tip is to refrigerate your food before freezing. It'll allow it to freeze faster if it's cold first. Next. All right, so the second breakfast I made was breakfast burritos for my family. So it's the same thing as the vegan burritos. You gather all your ingredients, cook to your preference, and then cool completely, fill your tortillas, and freeze the same way as the vegan burritos. So a tip here is to freeze only what will freeze within 24 hours. So you don't want to load your freezer completely full with unfrozen food. Next. Okay, so this was kind of exciting and new to me, freezing raw eggs. So to do this, you're going to choose fresh, uncracked eggs and then mix the egg yolk and the whites, being careful not to incorporate too much air. And the next step is optional. You can add sugar, cornstarch, or salt, and that helps with the texture of the eggs. So you're going to measure 3 tablespoons of mixture into an ice cube tray or silicone ice cube tray, which is equal to 1 egg. Then you freeze, and once the eggs are completely frozen, you can remove from the ice cube tray and store in a container or freezer bag. And to use, you're going to thaw in the refrigerator. Thawing and reheating. So for our burritos, there's a couple ways to thaw. You can thaw overnight in the refrigerator. Or this was new to me, I used the defrost setting on my microwave, which was really easy. So I defrosted the burritos and then I heated them up a little bit when that was done, and my burrito was heated through perfectly. Another way is to heat in the microwave from frozen. And you always want to make sure to reheat fully cooked food to 165 degrees. Next. So, the third breakfast item I made was smoothies, and this is super easy and it's a great way to use up fresh fruits and vegetables or frozen ones that you have. You're just going to add what you want, fruits and vegetables to the blender and then the liquid of your choice. I was out of juice, so I just added water, and then you're going to blend. Super simple. Next. So the first photo is a photo of some silicone molds. Using these molds make it really easy to pop the smoothies out and store them in a freezer bag. So once you have your smoothie all blended up, you're going to fill your molds and then freeze. Next. Once they're frozen, remove them from the molds, place in freezer containers, and you can enjoy frozen or add it to a blender with some liquid. So my family enjoys just grabbing these and eating them. So you can kind of do whatever you would like. So a tip is to stack your containers in your freezer once they're frozen to save space. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Maria or myself?
So we had one question that came in, which is on Maria's slide. It said 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And are we really supposed to get our freezers that cold?
That's what USDA recommends. I know a lot of times if you have a freezer, refrigerator combination, that may not get that cold. My experience has been newer ones tend to maintain that temperature better, and they often come with a digital display on the door. But yes, it is 0 degrees Fahrenheit. You might think, oh, is that Celsius? No, it's 0 degrees. And one of the things, and this tags on to what Mary shared, is that the faster you freeze a food, the better quality it's going to have. It helps minimize those ice crystals from spreading. So keep it that way. There was another question too. I don't know if everybody saw it. I just wanted to make sure I clarified if I didn't say it out loud, is that for blanching, you start the timer when your food starts boiling. So one of the things I found, if I because I'm not very patient, if I dump a big load of vegetables into a big pot, it takes more time to boil. So, which is not that good for the food. So I try to use, a smaller saucepan and do the blanching in a series of steps.
Great. Thank you, Maria. In the interest of time, let's go ahead and go back and we'll try to have more time for Q&A. But for those of you who do have ongoing questions, we can try to also answer them in writing. So again, just use that Q&A feature, and you can also see questions that have been answered in writing there. Thanks.
Okay, so Robin's going to share with us grocery to freeze.
Thank you, Maria. So my presentation is basically about buying in bulk and buying on sale so that you can save money, because I'm not a farmer, I'm not a homesteader. I like to buy things when they're on sale, and I hate to waste food. So much in the same way that we turn to preserving when something is in season, or when we have a glut of something like tomatoes or zucchini, the same thing can be applied to the grocery store haul. Are we sharing the slides, Maria? So I always buy items on sale, or I buy them in bulk and preserve them for later. So freezing is a really excellent way to do this. On a recent grocery store trip, I discovered a 2-pack of previously frozen chickens on sale. And this means that I'm going to make a chicken dinner. And I buy the 2-pack, even though there's no way my husband and I are going to eat 2 chickens in the next 4 days. So one of the things I'm going to show you is how to preserve these 2 chickens so we can enjoy some now and we can enjoy some later. And nothing is better with a chicken dinner than some stuffing and some roasted vegetables and the oatmeal cookies for dessert. So I bought all these ingredients, and here's how I'm going to use the freezer to help me preserve my grocery store bounty. So we're going to start with those chickens. I've got 2. I can only cook 1. What am I going to do with the other one? It's been frozen already. It's been defrosted at the store. Can I refreeze it? The answer is yes. I can refreeze it. Next slide. So the freezer is your best friend. Defrosted meat can be refrozen, provided it's been thawed safely. So this chicken will go into an additional freezer quality plastic wrap. You could also use a butcher paper, put today's date on it, and go put it into the freezer with space around it so that air can circulate to ensure even and quick freezing. And then once it's frozen hard again, I'm going to nest it right there up close with my other meat to keep it coldest. I'm going to want to use it sooner than I would if it was a fresh frozen bird. So I mentioned that in order to refreeze meat, it would have to have been frozen safe or defrosted safely in the first place. So the safest thawing of meat takes place under refrigeration between 33 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit on the bottom shelf in some kind of a tray to catch any juices. So regarding this other chicken, the second chicken, I want to cook it tonight. How many of you have done this? Stick my hand in the cavity, it's frozen on the inside. I don't have time to put it in the refrigerator and let it defrost on its own. A second safe way to defrost this chicken is to put the package into a bowl of water. So this is important. The food must be in a leak-proof package or plastic bag. If the bag leaks, bacteria from the air or the surrounding environment could be introduced into the food. The water needs to be 70 degrees or below. So you want to refresh that cold water every 30 minutes or alternately just drizzle the cold water over the meat. As long as you don't do this for more than 2 hours, you're not compromising the safety of the meat. And on a side note, for safety, next slide, please, don't wash your chicken. So research has shown that washing a chicken under running water in a sink can splash salmonella bacteria all around the kitchen, onto your clean dishes, onto other food, and it's a food safety risk. If you must clean your chicken, consider wiping it with a paper towel. Alternately, use great care not to splash any water that's come in contact with the chicken around the kitchen. So cooking a chicken to 165 degrees internal temperature kills that salmonella bacteria. It kills anything that you might be thinking that you're washing off. So after getting a chicken in the oven, remember to wash all of your surfaces and your utensils before starting on any vegetables. So after we enjoy a meal with this delicious roast chicken, like I said, there are only 2 of us. We're going to have leftovers. I don't know how you feel about leftovers, but I know I'm not a huge fan of them myself, but I've become really good at repurposing leftovers. So after dinner, the chicken's going to go into the fridge because the next day, when I take it out, I can slice some chicken off. I can eat a sandwich. Then I can slice all the chicken off of the bone, cut it up the way I'm going to use it eventually. And then that chicken cut off the bone goes into freezer bags labeled with today's date. All of the air is squeezed out. So Mary talked about some of the ways to do that. I also find that if I fill up the bag nice and I just push all the air out of it, I can get most of the air out of it just by pushing it. I don't have to do anything very much fancier than that. But you do want to get as much of the air out as possible for all of those reasons that Maria discussed. So I'm going to put my bones in a separate bag and I'm going to put that in the freezer because one of these days I'm going to boil them up and they're going to make an amazing bone broth. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about vegetables because Maria talked about blanching. If you have time to cook on the weekend and you're chopping onions and carrots and celery for one meal, you might consider chopping it for many meals. You can also save the peels and the cores and the ends of all your vegetables in a freezer bag, and later you can use them to make vegetable broth. Put them in the freezer. So Maria talked about how and why to blanch vegetables. We're still in the vegetables here. You can do that, but it's not a safety issue. If you just chop extra, then you put them into containers in your freezer and use them within a short amount of time, the quality of the vegetables won't be too affected. They won't be crunchy when you take them out of the freezer, but they can absolutely be used in recipes that don't call for crunchy vegetables. So this is much more affordable than buying chopped veggies from the produce section. And now we can go to the next slide, where the same is true really for any vegetables that you're sauteing even. So for this meal, I sauteed onions, celery, and carrots for my stuffing. So I just sauteed a bunch of them. I sauteed extra. And then I cooled the extra ones by spreading them out on a cookie sheet, because you don't want to put anything warm into a freezer package, because it might stay in that danger zone of 40 to 140 degrees for an unsafe period of time. Also, it might generate moisture inside of the container, which would compromise the quality of the food. Also, you don't want to put anything warm into the freezer, because it will warm up the temperature of the freezer and put the items around it at risk. So I put these completely cooled, sauteed vegetables into various size freezer packages with a label indicating what was in there and the date. And then I can use these for a quick meal and not have to spend time chopping and sauteing on a weeknight. And then it shows here there, I did use a glass jar, and it's just important, you know how some of the jars have shoulders. It's important to use a jar without a shoulder because the food expands because of any liquid that's in it, and it could crack the jar with the shoulders. It goes straight up. It won't form itself onto the neck of the jar. All right, next slide. So like all good meals, I'm going to end with dessert. We should all be keeping our tree nuts in the freezer for quality and safety. In my club store, I can get 2 pounds of nuts for the same price that I would get 1 pound at a bulk grocery store. But even at a less expensive price, we spend a lot for nuts, and they're important to have in our diets. But nuts go bad because of oxidation, because of enzymes and chemical changes. And most commonly with nuts, what we see is rancidity, which is just disgusting. So putting your nuts into a freezer safe container in the freezer can slow these processes. The nuts are hard when they come out of the freezer, but they don't have to be defrosted before being used in a recipe. And the same is true of oatmeal, flour, any kind of grain. Keeping grains in the freezer kills any larvae or eggs or pests that might be inside the flour. So if you keep your grains in the freezer, you greatly reduce your chances of ending up with pantry moths. And like with the nuts, it preserves the flour, the oats, the grains for longer. And these don't need to be defrosted before using them. You can keep sugar in the freezer if your residence is prone to invasions of ants. And finally, if you find butter on sale, butter freezes very well and defrosts in the refrigerator with no change of flavor or texture. And I love homemade cookies, but I can't stand the pressure of having an entire batch of cookies in the kitchen. I can't rest until they're gone. So my saving grace is the freezer. You want to change the slide? There's really 2 options. Once the cookies, you can bake all of the cookies, bake them all. And then once the cookies are completely cool, just take out the ones you're going to eat that you want to eat, place them, the rest of them in a freezer safe container, put a piece of parchment paper between the layers, squeeze out all the air, label them and store them, and they'll last in the freezer for a long time if you can forget that they're in there. The other thing is just freeze cookie dough. You can shape the cookie dough into balls, and then eventually you'll bake them directly from frozen. You surprise guests, your grandkid comes over, grab a couple of cookie balls, throw them in the toaster oven, and you've got cookies. So you might want to help the cookies flatten partway through baking. On you can individually quick freeze, which is what I do. I just put the balls on a cookie tray in the freezer, just quick 30 minutes maybe before putting them in the bag. And then it makes sure that they don't get all stuck together in the freezer. And then one final note, because I too am loath to contribute to the plastic bag problem. I do reuse my plastic zipper bags many times. I wash them well with hot soapy water and I hang them to dry between uses. But alternatives to bags, such as the silicone molds, the glass jars, and other containers might be more preferable to you. But just remember that air is not a friend of freezing. So thank you. And I think it's Elena's turn.
Thanks, Robin. So my big thing is that you should always make sure you're freezing your food how you use it. Wait a second. I think we skipped a slide, Maria. Hmm, that's odd. I thought that there was an additional slide in there. Oh, well, I guess that's slightly out of order, but that's fine. In any case, you're more likely to use the food that you preserve when it's easy to use it, right? So we have so much food coming in from our gardens all at once, and we're all desperately just trying to get it preserved so it doesn't go to waste. At least that's what I'm doing in my house. So a lot of the time, the temptation is to just shove it all in the freezer and hope for the best. And I have definitely been guilty of doing that and then coming back 3 months later and pulling out a mystery bag of something or other that I did not label. Um, so the big thing here is you have to freeze it how you're going to use it. That's how you're going to actually get it used and eaten. So in my house, this looks like shredding all of the zucchini before it goes into the freezer because that's mostly how I use zucchini. I also like putting whole tomatoes in the freezer to make them easier to peel if I'm going to do a canning project with them. And also making prepared foods and freezing them, like Robin and Mary have shown before. I did some turkey pasta sauce, and that works great in the freezer. Next slide. So, what do we do with too much zucchini? Because I am sure we have all had that problem at some point. If you plant a zucchini plant, you get too much zucchini. Doesn't matter how many zucchini plants you have. So, like I said, I do a lot of shredded zucchini, and I can hide that in any number of ways. The ever popular zucchini bread, which we have a fun vegan recipe for in the handout. We can also mix it into meatballs or meatloaf, add it to pasta sauce. I also like adding chunks of zucchini to soups. Next slide, please. But what do these things all have in common? They're all cooked, and none of them rely heavily on texture. So, like everybody before me has pointed out, texture gets lost in high water content vegetables like zucchini when they are frozen because of the cell walls bursting. But texture is also lost when you cook or bake things. The zucchini gets mushy, it shrinks down, a lot of the water comes out of it when you cook it. So, we can take a shortcut. If you're only going to be using your zucchini in applications where it's going to be cooked and it's not going to need to be crunchy or have texture really, we don't need to blanch it before we freeze it. You can direct your energy and efforts elsewhere. So I do this a lot for zucchini bread. I straight up just shred the zucchini with my food processor. I like to measure it out into 2-cup portions because that's what I usually use in recipes. And then that goes in the freezer. I usually freeze it flat in bags because I don't have a ton of freezer space. But the fun thing about zucchini bread is you can go from freezer to freezer. So you can take some frozen shredded zucchini and turn that into a loaf of zucchini bread. You just mix it and bake it up as normal and let it cool completely. Then you can freeze it. Zucchini bread freezes beautifully, either whole or in slices. Next slide, please. So some other great options for storing. Soup, sauces, and smoothies in particular. The silicone freezer cubes that others have mentioned are really quite versatile. You can use them for pretty much any liquid or pureed consistency food. You can get different sizes for different types of food. The smaller sizes I find work really well for herbs and water, garlic, and other aromatics and things that aren't going to need a whole lot of in one recipe. Medium sizes I like for individual servings of sauces, like pasta sauce or sometimes pizza sauce. The bigger sizes work best for things like soups and stews where you're trying to thaw out like an entire cup or 2 cups at a time. Or if you have a larger family, that can also work really well for a family-sized portion of sauces. Next, please. So, carrying on with the what can we do with too many theme, tomatoes. It's the other thing that I tend to get one giant clump of per year. So, a lot of people, when they think of preserving tomatoes, think of canning them. But not all tomato products are canned, and not all of them need to be canned. We can also freeze them for a lot more recipe flexibility. So I don't prefer to can my tomato sauces because I like the flexibility to not need to acidify them further. So I make the sauces and I freeze them in portions that are convenient for me. If you do like canning your tomato products, then I highly recommend trying out pre-freezing your tomatoes so you can peel them easier. I just pull out the cores and pop them in the freezer whole. Then you blanch them essentially as normal from frozen. You just take the little frozen tomato ball and dunk it in hot water with a slotted spoon for 30 seconds to a minute, usually. It works for me. And then pop it back in an ice bath, and the skin comes off so easily, and it's way less mess. Next slide. So with sauces comes the I've heated this up and now I need to cool it down problem. For safety, of course, we want to cool down our soups and sauces as quickly as possible to get them out of the danger zone, which is 40 degrees Fahrenheit to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The issue with soups and sauces is that they hold onto their heat really, really well. There's a lot of water, there's a lot of thermal mass in there. So tall containers, like the one on the left here, dissipate heat a lot more slowly than the shallow, flat container like I have on the right, which is a baking dish. I usually use it for brownies and cinnamon rolls. Another fun tip that I kind of got from my engineering curriculum is that the material can also matter in containers. So metal conducts heat a lot better than something like plastic, which the heat takes longer to dissipate out from the sides. But the main thing is that you want as much surface area as possible to let that heat basically dissipate off of the surface. So, point being, choose your containers intentionally when you're trying to cool things down fast. Next slide, please. So again, what do we do with too much fruit? Usually for me, this comes in the form of approximately 100 pounds of oranges off of a tree. Yes, a lot of them do get donated. There's only so many oranges you can preserve. But preventing food waste means that we're trying to find ways to save food that would otherwise be thrown away. And a lot of the time that means fruits that are past their prime. I know that we definitely end up with some, a handful of strawberries at the end of the week that are kind of dried out and sad looking, but are still perfectly safe to eat, but nobody wants to use them because they don't look tasty. Next slide, please. So I find that usually those kind of sad end of the road fruits do best when they're either baked, cooked, or pureed. So for pureeing, popsicles work beautifully. I included a few different flavors of popsicles in the handout. But in any case, they're very easy to make. It's just fruit, liquid of choice, put it through a blender until it's nice and runny. Then I use popsicle molds because I find them easiest to eat. But you can also use ice cube trays, silicone molds, an old yogurt container, regular Tupperware, anything you want, really. These will stay good in the freezer for several weeks in the molds. If you want them to last longer than that, I would suggest putting them in a freezer Ziploc, just to keep the air contact to a minimum. Next slide. So the other thing that you can do with fruits in the freezer is you can do fruit chunks. So unlike vegetables, fruit chunks generally are frozen without blanching. You typically want to flash freeze them in separate pieces, and all that means is we're going to put it on a baking sheet without touching, much like the way you make cookies, and just put that in your freezer until they're frozen solid. It just prevents them from basically clumping together in one giant clump, because whenever that happens to me, my blender is not super thrilled with my life choices. So those, of course, can be used in smoothies, popsicles. You can eat them as is. I really enjoy eating frozen fruit as is, especially in the summer when it's nice and hot. So yeah, that's a super easy way to keep your fruit fresh. Next, please. Oops. So yeah, we are now at the questions portion.
Wonderful. Let's see, we have a question from Donna. Is it safe to refreeze previously frozen fish that was properly handled? That is, just treat it the way you treat chicken.
Yes. So, I mean, I think the big thing is a lot of fish comes in. Maria, did you want to answer? Okay. A lot of fish comes in those the shrink wrapped packages, so there's no oxygen in there. So you just have to make sure that that hasn't gotten into the danger zone while it still was in the anaerobic conditions, because that is not safe for the fish. But if it has been, like Elena said, opened that freezer, that non-oxygen package has been opened, that's been defrosted in the refrigerator, it can go back in to the freezer. But the quality is going to be definitely affected. Fresh fish is, one of the reasons that fish is so good nowadays is because they just take it and they freeze it right on the boat, super fast. And the longer that you have fish hanging around, the less flavorful it is.
Right.
But it's certainly better than throwing it away.
Yeah, it's a more delicate texture than, say, beef. Okay. Any other comments on that, Robin? Yeah. So a question was asked, actually, Maureen, I'll just go ahead, about cooling things down quickly. How long is too long? So the rule of thumb is 2 hours. You want to make sure that food is not in that danger zone. Any of you who are SURSAFE certified, it's a little different, but I always tell people 40 to 140. It's easy to remember. 2 hours is the max. But I let mine cool down. Typically, the recommendation for food service is set about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So you don't want to put boiling, spaghetti sauce into your refrigerator. Let it cool down a little bit on the counter, but not more than 2 hours. And again, like Elena was saying, putting it into a shallow pan, preferably metal, is the best way. So I'll leave it on the counter, maybe cover, I leave the cover slightly off to let the heat dissipate, and then and then get it down to 70. You can also stir it, and that'll help cool it down more quickly. So, does that anybody else want to add to that?
Just a follow-up, are there other techniques that can cool things down quickly?
You can put ice, depending on what it is. You can put
I
ice
could say an
into
ice
it.
bath.
Yeah, or put
Ice
it.
bath or
Yeah,
ice around it. You could put a
Mhm.
container into an ice bath.
Yeah, that's good.
Um,
And again, stirring it and keep it in those shallow containers.
Wonderful. How long can nuts be kept in the freezer?
well, I mean, they can be kept for years, really. So they can be stored, with the shells on or without the shells. Different nuts last, keep their quality better. So like almonds can be stored in a freezer, usually for a year. Walnuts and pecans for 2 years. Pistachios for 3 years. So and this is from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, where I got that data. But they do last a very long time in the freezer.
Great, thank you. It was mentioned if food has already been cooked and then frozen, when you pull it out, you need to reheat it up to 165 degrees. Why that hot?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I know there's been many times I buy freezer food that's fully cooked, and I wonder why there's that warning on the instructions. And the reason is freezing doesn't kill all the bacteria, it just puts a pause on it. So once it thaws, the bacteria become very active. And like we talked about, cell walls rupturing from the ice crystals, the bacteria becomes very active. And so heating it up to 165 is going to make it safe to kill any microorganisms or bacteria that's in the food.
Great, thank you. We're at 7:58, so I think Maria, we need to return to you for the closing slides.
Okay. So, of course, for upcoming events, you can always follow us on Eventbrite. We have several fun programs coming up. We have our monthly Ask a Master Food Preserver, how to safely dehydrate food at home with or without a dehydrator, and a really interesting program on homemade baby and toddler food coming up. You can also access our previous recordings here, and both of these links will also be in the handout that you receive when you leave the Zoom and complete the survey. Next, please. So, as always, if you have a food preservation question, you're welcome to attend our monthly Ask a Master Food Preserver. It's always on the second Wednesday of each month from 7 to 8 p.m. You are also now able to submit a question to our brand new helpline. Again, these links will be in the handout as well. So if you're interested in learning more from us, sign up for our monthly newsletter. It has some awesome articles written by my fellow MFPs, fascinating pieces each month. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram for day-to-day content. And as always, we need your input. That wonderful survey that I've mentioned, where you get the handout at the end. When you leave this Zoom, a brief survey will pop up in your browser. Please complete it and help us improve. When you submit that survey, the pop-up acknowledgement will include a link to the class handout folder with recipes and tips. As always, thank you for your time and interest, and happy preserving.